Would like to now welcome in Kevin Ratner, who's going to speak to us about the new urban work environment. Kevin is the president of Forest City West, which develops and manages a diverse portfolio and premier real estate. It's a 100-year-old company, and he's got focus primarily on the West Coast and certainly a heavy emphasis here in San Francisco. And their focus really is primarily on urban development. And his current focus is around mixed-use development centered on technology and today's innovation economy. So without further ado, let's welcome in Kevin.
Thank you. So I guess first I would have to apologize. My throat picked a perfect day to go out on me. So I pardon the hoarseness. And this is the clicker here. Okay. Open City. So Open City is a product that, or idea or concept or guiding principle that we have developed out here on the West Coast and slowly is getting adopted throughout the rest of the company. As I go through the presentation, I think Open City will become more obvious to you what it means, but to us what it means is that the way that we approach development, the way that we approach tenanting, the way that we approach how we choose the places where we develop. The idea is that there's interaction and that we've learned a lot from what's happening and from talking to people and from studying the people who use our real estate, and how do we respond to that? How do we change that? How do we change the way that we develop so that we can develop products that people want? Yes, no? I'm going arrows, right? Here, I have the presentation right here. I can just go the old school way. Keeping it analog. Oh, here we go. Okay, so this is a little bit about who we are. You can see some statistics up there. Generally, the way that I describe us, particularly out here, is that we are a six-fingered glove for a six-fingered property. So what we like, thank you. What we Thank you. Said another way, we do big, small. So we look for things that are particular. We don't appeal to everybody. We know that, but the people who we do appeal to, we have a strong attraction to. This, as you may guess, is San Francisco. This is actually a mapping of Twitter feeds. And if you take housing prices and you map it to where the Twitter feeds are, you'll find that housing prices are high around where some of those Twitter feeds are heavy. I can't speak specifically to Alcatraz, although I think if they're willing to redevelop it, we'd probably give it a shot. The other thing that I would say is as a real estate developer, one of the things that I learned early was that oftentimes where artists and restaurants go, that's where I want to go, because that's on the edge. That's the places that are up and coming. That's the places where maybe I can get a property that I don't have to pay full price for. I would say today, technology is one of those bellwethers that we look for, one of the things that we are looking towards. Where are the tech companies going? Where is technology happening? So maps like this are really interesting to us. So we've taken Open City and we've applied it to the three major food groups of real estate that we develop. So the first is office or work. And we see that work has changed a lot. When we were developing our property out here and we were trying to decide what to do with fifth emission, or 5M as we call it, which you'll hear more about as I go through the presentation, we did a long user research process around how are people working, what do they want out of their workspaces, and you've heard actually a lot of the stuff that they were talking about for Salesforce, and I'm sure throughout the day you've heard lots of stuff around that. One of the things that I think is really interesting, which just I did not plan it this way, but the way that what they were talking about is intellectual property. The idea of protecting, right? The idea that people want to be way out in the suburbs, they want to be in a campus that's closed off. If it were up to them, people would go out there, they would never leave, right? Because then they can't share their ideas, they know what's happening to them, and they would have them working 24 hours a day. But that's moving, right? People now want to connect. People want to be in the cities. They want to bump into people. They want connections. They want to be able to ask questions of people who they don't work with, because maybe you can ask a question that you wouldn't ask to a coworker. Residential is changing mightily. The thing that I think that's so interesting on this is space, right? So when I was doing an apartment building back in 2000, I would build a one-bedroom apartment that would be 1,100, 1,200 square feet. Now my two bedrooms are like 800 square feet. So space is becoming less important. Location, neighborhood, diversity, all those kinds of things are becoming even more important. So it's actually changing the product type. Retail. Retail to me is the place that actually we've done the least amount of study, but I think may actually be the most interesting. We currently have a mall that we own in Redondo Beach, California. It's down south, just south of Los Angeles, and we've owned it since the 80s. And we're just now looking at redeveloping it, and I think it's the mall, I think, is a super interesting place. When you look at the amount of people that go to a mall, how do you engage them? What can they find there? So what we buy, I think, is one of the most interesting things. It says here, big brands and global goods to local brands and artisan goods. So, the idea that, you can go find a shirt at a small curated shop that no one else is gonna have, is appealing to a lot of people, as opposed to, say, going to J. Crew or The Gap or something. Not that those aren't great brands and not that they don't do great stuff, but it seems like the trend is moving in a different direction. So, okay, all of that may be great, all well and good, but how do we, as a real estate company, as a producer and owner of real estate, how do we respond to all of this? How do we take this and turn it into our real estate? So we take three main things that we look at when we're looking at how to produce a property. So we look at tenanting, operations, and design. They're sort of in a specific order there. I would say that they're really sort of equals, but it's an approach to each one of those. This is, I think, a fascinating slide, not necessarily for what it says, but what the background picture is. So the background picture here is a group of people buying food at a food truck. Amazing, right? What's happening here, though, is when we took over Fifth and Mission and started leasing the existing buildings, a company went in there that at that time nobody knew, but turned out to be Square. So they were still developing their product. So what did they do? They took their prototype device, they gave it to the food trucks. The food truck operators used it. People came and bought their food and they swiped their cards. Then the guys from Square would come down, they would take it back, they would talk to the guy, they would tell him, hey, this was great, this didn't work so well, this was fantastic, this didn't go the way we thought. They go back to their office, they'd rejigger, they'd do it again, they'd bring it back down. So that's using the property, right? That's the food. We didn't put the food trucks there so that Square could figure out how to make their device, right? It just happened to work out that way. And that interaction, that sort of unexpected consequence of putting these things together, and you heard some of it, in the questions that were asked about how spaces can come together, how open space and cafeterias. I know that Jervis didn't seem to be a big fan of cafeterias, but cafeterias can be an amazing place, right? People connect over food. So all of this has really taken place for us in a project that we call 5M. It's at the corner of 5th and Mission here in San Francisco. This is to give you an idea of sort of how we think about tenanting. I would say it's very purposeful tenanting, right? We're just not out looking for whoever's going to pay us the most amount of money. We're looking for people who are going to bring something to the party, right? They're going to want to host events, or they're going to drive content, or they're going to bring people together, or they're going to make things happen around them, and maybe bring other tenants who want to be in there, right? And that's creating a lot of desirability.
Show them where we are now.
Okay, so this is 5th Street. This is 5th Street. That's Mission. That's the Mint right there. We're like over here, kind of. Bloomingdale's, I don't know if that orients anybody, is right up there. This is just showing you when we do the tenanting, we want to make sure that it's gonna drive interactions, right? So this is just saying, don't put all the entries on the outside of the building, right? Put some of the entries and entrance exits to the buildings in the middle of the property, so that people will come in and out. You're doing a little social engineering, right? Trying to predict and create behaviors. Operations is obviously the next one. This is something that is called the Upfest. The Upfest was done on the property at 5M. We, Forest City, did not come up with the idea. We, Forest City, didn't make it happen. We, Forest City, gave them the platform and helped them figure out how they could get the permits and how they get all this stuff. But it was all the tenants that are in the building that came up with this idea. And the next slide, which I'll put up here, really, I think, describes operations. And I'm a big fan of, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So this is how we think operations has changed a lot. I don't know that I need to say a lot more about that. So now we've gotten to design. This slide is really to say that design is again the third thing, but not a lesser. It's very important to make sure that the design is correct. So this is really just saying, the floor plate is a almost sort of traditional floor plate for what tech companies want, right? You have to build so that the companies are going to just want your property, and so that it's going to make them productive and innovative and meet all of their needs. So large column spacing, side core, lots of windows, all of that. We pay a lot of attention to that. This is just what the space looks like now. So here, Howard, Fifth. Again, Mission, this is, a lot of parking lots, which when fully developed will all go away. The location is a very interesting location. I don't know how much all of you know San Francisco, but it's really at the nexus of a bunch of different communities. So one of the things is we're planning to build high rises, which we'll get a little sneak peek at in a little bit. But we're also close to SoMa, and SoMa is a very desirable place in San Francisco. So how do we do that? How do we take this urban, downtown, high-rise form and the SoMa funky, cool, low-rise, brick and timber, and how do we put them together in a place so that we get the best of both of those? We actually think that that's possible. So this is what it's actually even changed from what this design is, but you get an idea. So this is the Chronicle building, and that's been left there. This is 447 Minna, and that's been left there. That will house nonprofit arts organizations and groups like that. Open space here, open space on top of the Chronicle. Large forms, obviously, but a lot of varying of heights, a lot of varying around the podiums. How you view a building, how you interact with a building is a lot of it is the first 60 feet, but you see it from a distance too. So trying to take all of that into account. This gives you an idea of some of the activities that we're doing there. So it's both residential and office. Retail around all the bases are all retail. That's that pink along the bottom that you see. And these are just some of our guiding principles. And I'm going to run through a couple slides here and show you just some of the ways that we're thinking about it. But, and frankly, you heard it from the Salesforce guy. I mean, a big user looking for what he's looking for. He's looking for the active ground plane. He's looking for those program spaces. He's looking for those opportunities to allow the people who work for him to choose where they work, how they work, get inspired, go run into other people. He's still, I think, doing a lot of it for Salesforce people, and that's fine. I get that. We think that this property, could wind up with like a, Salesforce, let's pray and hope type tenant, or it could wind up with multiple tenants, and it works for either one of them. So this is just going to give you some reference material, kind of how we're thinking about things. So, we're trying to break down the forms. We're trying to make things a little bit more playful. We're trying to make things porous, make things inviting. We don't want to build an ivory tower that people are afraid to interact with, or that they're afraid to go around because they think that they're not allowed, right? So it's trying to make it all much more playful and open to people. You did hear Jervis. Again, I love this picture with the umbrellas. I think that's fantastic. But talk about events. So we're huge fans of events. I think as an owner of properties, whether it's a 88-unit residential property or a million-plus square foot development, and the opportunity to create events, program events, allow users the platform to create their own events, do things that interest them. I think it's a fantastic way to create community. I think it's a fantastic way to engage users, engage the community around you, draw people to your property. It really puts you, I think, in a unique place if you can begin to do events and think about how that really drives the desirability of what it is you're doing. Again, open space is one of the critical factors. We have a lot of it at 5th and Mission. We're also doing another property down by the bay called Pier 70. That's about 28 acres. And when it's fully developed, it will have, I forget the exact numbers, but 9 acres of parks, lots of open space. We're actually making a sort of maker village / nonprofit place for nonprofits in the middle of the property. Because again, it's about that space, right? What the analogy that I use is in a apartment building. I'm going to, in particularly in Southern California, but up here as well, I'm going to build a pool, right? I'm going to build a pool. I'm going to build a community room. I'm going to build one of those one of those rooms with a huge screen and all the chairs that nobody ever sits in. Like I'm going to build all those things so that when someone comes and they tour the property, they're going to go, oh yeah, okay, yep. All right, great, I'm going to live here, right? So, I look at the retail in that same way. I look at events and open space in the same way, right? Those are amenities, right? So I'm going to invest in them. I'm going to say it doesn't have to be. That doesn't have to drive the income of my property. The people renting the space are going to drive the income of my property. So the more that I can engage them, the more that I can create space that's dynamic and that they want to be in, the more that they can do. Pier 70 is going to be an extreme example of that. So this is some of the design. I'll run through these relatively quickly. This is a sneak peek. These have not been released to the public, so if anybody asks, you never saw this. So these, a lot of it is, again, is the podiums, as I mentioned, trying to take the facades, of the building and not make them these glassy towers, break them up, make them a little rougher. It's a little bit of what Soma has. Like you can see that in those facades. That is actually one building, but you're breaking it up by doing treating the facades a little differently to break down its scale. Again, the retail and the open space, we focus pretty heavily on that. And this is, really it's important to be playful, I think, is to not take it so seriously, right? Make a space that people can use, can change, can interact with, can really engage with. This is the open space on top of the Chronicle, which as much as I always get really scared when people show me water on top of my buildings, it looks like, this will be, I think, a really spectacular space, and it will be open to the public. And that's it. Wind, yes, wind. We spend San Francisco's a windy place. No, we have to do it. There's a lot of city codes around wind. We've spent a lot of time in the wind tunnel trying to test it. In fact, we actually had to completely change the way where the height was on the property in order to adjust for wind, because you frightening as it sounds, you wind up with some of these conditions that are dangerous, like blow you off your feet, dangerous. So yes, we spent a lot of time considering wind, and it's just one of the things you have to do.
Hey, Kevin, great presentation. How smart are your buildings? 5M or this? In terms of building intelligence,
Yeah.
Internet of Things,
Yeah.
integrated systems?
Yeah. Well, I would tell you not smart enough would probably be my answer. That stuff changes so fast. It's so hard to know what to do. In our apartment buildings, if I showed you the amount of wires and stuff that we put into the buildings to allow people to have hardline phones, it's like, okay, why does anyone have a hardline phone, right? But we do that. So how do we make them smarter? How can they become more interesting buildings to be around, to interact with? And the technology is something which we have a whole IT department, and we try to push, but it's probably a place that we could do a lot more work on and get a lot more inventive and creative with. And I think our tenants will push us there pretty quickly.
Along those same lines, how are you thinking about technology within the open spaces? So the places between the buildings and how you'd like people to interact with them, and then building in flexibility over time.
Yeah, in some of those photographs that I was spinning through pretty quickly, like a lot of those walls are interactive walls. You see these walls where people open them up to Twitter feeds, and they're going through. I was at an art installation where there were these 3 women, and there were these huge screens above them, and they were basically doing Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and there must have been 50 people just sitting there watching them do their right, and they're all sitting around. I'm like, well, what is this? I don't know. What is this? Is this interesting? I don't know. But I think that type of interaction and making those public spaces global in a way through technology, I think is a fascinating thing, and a way to make them dynamic, and a way to make them engaging, and a way to make people want to keep coming back to them, because they're not going to be the same every time. It's going to change over time, and it's going to evolve, and I think a lot of user input around that I think is really fascinating, and we're very open and interested in that. Again, it's like we try to stay on top of it. At the end of the day, I build buildings, people who are much better at technology than I am, and would love to collaborate with them and bring them in and find out what we could do.
Kevin, when you think about pop-up retail retail and pop-up workplace as activity in your buildings?
I think that's a great idea. You saw in one of the pictures containers. So in some place like Pier 70, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for that. A lot of that village that I talked about that's going to be in the middle, that's going to be a place where all kinds of creative stuff like that could happen. You could have a nonprofit working there for a month, and then maybe go away, and then a new retailer shows up. Who knows? That kind of stuff. That dynamic aspect of real estate is something I think that's really interesting. Of course, it's hard to do in a lot of places because, look, they're built out of steel and wood and timber, and it's, so technology and open space where you can move it and make it dynamic, I think is a really great part of what we can do.
Wonderful. Well, let's give Kevin a big round of applause. So I bet you're all a little interested in